Hi everybody, this is Julie, and today I'm going to show you how to make these paper bead icicles that are made with cardstock and Czech crystals. You can get a total of 6 icicles from one sheet of cardstock, and you're going to need crystals in 4 different sizes. Actually, one of them is actually a size 6 seed bead. And the ornament hangers are made with paper clips like I showed you in a previous video. And basically what you're going to get when you download the free project sheet is this sheet here, which has all the materials and tools that you're going to need on it. It'll explain it to you, and the sizes of the crystals as well as the other beads that you're going to need. And there's on this project sheet is a blank space here so you can put your project notes, and then this is the actual template. And yes, there is a map here on this this sheet of instructions that just tells you what pieces go actually into the beads for the icicles. And the way I drew this out is you've got, each one makes six icicles. So you've got 3 rectangles, and what I did is I split the rectangles in thirds, perfect thirds, because I wanted the icicles beads to be a total of, I can't remember the exact measurement, but it's just under 3 inches. So basically, if you take a look at it like this, you've got your 3 beads. And then what I did with this tall rectangle, and after I drew the straight lines, I drew a diagonal line from one corner to the other in a 1/16 of an inch. And that made it possible for when you roll up the strips to have 3 gradually smaller and smaller beads. And you're going to have a cone at the bottom, and you're going to have partial cones in the other 2 beads. Alright, so let's get started. Okay, so before we really actually get started, I wanted to explain these different colors and how I achieved them. Like this one here is a piece of marble printed colored cardstock that I bought at Walmart. It was on a cardboard paper pad. Can't remember the name of it. And these here were also printed cardstock 8.5 by 11, and it just had blue stripes down it. And this one here is without it being embellished. What I did here to get the extra diagonal stripes is I used a light blue Sharpie marker and just colored the edges before I rolled it up. And that's what I did with these also. And this one was cardstock also, 8.5 by 11, that got treated with the marker. And those are the ones I will be assembling later on in the video. And what I did here, this is just plain white cardstock that I colored the edges with a silver Sharpie. And because I wanted to give it more of a spiral type of look to it, like icy, that's been worn out a bit. Okay, and then I have some plain white ones, of course, and those are just plain white cardstock, run-of-the-mill, inexpensive, off the shelf at Walmart. And today I am going to be doing one that I actually printed, and that will be coming up next. Okay, so I'm actually using a cutting machine to cut my template, but of course you can always use scissors and a rotary cutter and use this template to overlay your cardstock or whatever you want to make your beads out of. I used cardstock instead of copy paper because I wanted fatter beads. If you were to use copy paper and you wanted to achieve this thickness, I would layer it two thicknesses to get them this big. If you want them really, really skinny and use smaller crystals, just use the copy paper. That'll work just fine. Okay, and so this paper here is actually ready to be removed from the mat. So this is how I'm going to get started. I'm going to cut off the borders, or take the borders away. And yeah, I'll be rolling up these borders so they don't go to waste. They'll actually be used for beads. Okay, this is going to take me just a moment here. Set that aside so I don't need to use it. And And my blade, I think, is starting to get a little dull, so I'm ripping here a little bit. But that's okay. When I roll it up, it won't show. Yeah. Alright, so basically what you're going to end up with for each ornament is 3 strips. This is your the one on the top, and this one here is your little cone at the very tip. And then you have this one here. These two here are the middle ones. And these you don't actually have to bundle up or anything. You can just go ahead and make them all, because you can actually, by the size, know where they go when you assemble the beads. So just get them all ready to cut and roll. And you're going to be rolling these with a 5/64" paper bead roller. And so that'll be the next step after removing it from the cutting mat. And like I said, you can get 6 icicles from each sheet of cardstock. So this is actually a great project for use in craft fairs and stuff, and I'll be selling what I've made, or just about all of them, at the craft fair. And these snowflakes, I'm kind of excited to see what they're going to look like, because I printed that off on my computer. And I do plan on providing the actual bead sheet that I used for this set of snowflakes. Icicles. Okay, so the next step is to start rolling them up. So what you're going to need, I'm going to set my instructions aside, so I don't need those right now. Okay, you're going to need your glue palette, whatever you use, white glue, 5/64" paper bead roller, toothpick, and a dish to put them in. Now my dishes that I have sitting right next to me are full of my crystal beads, so I'm going to pull that aside for now. Okay, so you can just get started. Actually, let's start from the small one and work my way up. And if you have scissors handy, go ahead and trim that up if you need to. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and put my glue. Don't worry, I'm not going to roll all these strips up on camera, just the ones that I want to show you. Like this one's a cone, and that's the bottom cone. So I'm going to slide it into the bead roller and just roll it up. And make sure that straight edge stays lined up. And apply the glue for about 1 inch. Yeah, these are fuzzy little snowflakes, almost like flannel fabric for like a nightgown. It's kind of silly. Alright, so there's the small one. I think these might end up being the prettiest icicles. Okay, so that's the small one. Let's pull up a medium. This one's a medium and this one's a long, so I'll do one of each. And if you notice, it's straight here for a while and then it goes down. And that's the nature of how these work, how you're going to get like a partial cone when you roll them up. And you start off with a tube bead and then it goes down gradually. And that's how you get that gradual cone shape. And the snowflakes actually really show up on this. Okay, and then apply the glue for the last inch. And I have another tip on how to go ahead and flatten both ends of your beads, and I'll show you that in a few minutes. I discovered it while I was making the other beads for the other icicles, and it works really, really well. And it's actually kind of fun too. And I'm not going to tell you what it is until I actually go get the thing I use after this is rolled up. See, it's a tube bead until you actually get to the end. right. And if you really wanted to, you could really use whatever color cardstock you want. It doesn't always have to be blue, silver, white. Use your imagination. If you want to use colored crystals, you can do that too. But for me, icicles are made of water and ice, so they're blue and white and silver and all that stuff. Okay, so I'm going to pull that off. And so I have my 3 beads ready. What you're going to do is when you have enough to string on to get ready for dipping, you can glaze these however you want, but I would go ahead, I like dipping them. So what I do is I put them on my 50-pound fishing line. I put the loop on one end, string on my beads with coffee stirrers between them. And when you're stringing them on like this, you don't need the coffee stirrers between each and every single one. You actually don't need them through between this one and this one, but you do for the rest. Okay, like I said, I was using coffee stirrers between the beads and realized that I didn't really need it between this tiny cone and the big one. It'll be fine. It doesn't affect it at all. But the coffee stirrers, to prevent them from sticking together and not getting the glaze on the flat edges, I cut up coffee stirrers and put them in between, and that worked out just fine. So you want to glaze them. I use 2 coats of PC Petrifier and 2 coats of liquid laminate on these strands of beads. But if you don't have liquid laminate, and you probably don't, you can use polyurethane, you can use vibrance. A lot of people use vibrance. But I like the 2 and 2, the PC Petrifier and the liquid laminate or vibrance. And so on to the next step, which is going to be assembly. Okay, so one thing before we get started with assembly, and before you actually glaze them, you're going to want to make sure that these ends are flat. And one way that I do it, that I've just recently discovered, is, believe it or not, set it down on your work surface and tap it with a hammer. 1 or 2 taps is really all you need, and that makes it perfectly flat. Just be gentle with it. Just a little tap. Works great. And you don't, because this is kind of tough to push down with your fingers. So, yeah, tapping the bottom of the cone is not as good. But the other 2, they work just fine. And in fact, after I get these glazed, I tend to cut that little ridge off before I actually put them on my wires. Okay, so next step, we're going to assemble one of these strands. Okay, so to assemble the icicles, what you're going to need is you're going to need some sort of a mat. Believe it or not, a piece of towel will work just fine for this. And so I'm going to set down the inspiration. Here are the beads that we're going to need. You're going to need 20 gauge wire. You can use either the inexpensive 20 gauge wire. Any 20 gauge wire will work just fine. I've been using these for most of these, but since I'm almost out, I also have this. This is available at Walmart. That was available at Walmart, believe it or not. But you can find 20 gauge wire anywhere. And you could even use the artistic wire, 20 gauge wire, the tarnish resistant stuff. But these work fine for me. I've had this for a while. It hasn't tarnished. Don't get the super duper cheap stuff because that will tarnish. Okay, so that's what you're going to need for that. And you're going to need size 6 E-beads or size 6 seed beads. These are Miyuki or Mayuki, however you want to pronounce it. They're Japanese and they're all exactly the same size. That's why I like to use them. But you can use clear E-beads too, but these have the AB finish and they're crystal. And that's what I've been using at the very tip here. And then the next size that you're going to need is you're going to need a 6mm faceted check crystal. I believe that's what they're called, the CZECH check crystals. Okay, and then you're also going to need this 8mm check crystals in the AB finish, so I've got one of those. And you're also going to need 10mm check crystals, and you're going to need one of those. So let me go grab one of my size 6 Miyuki seed beads right there. Set these aside so they're not in my way. And I'm sorry you can't really see that too well. Let's put these up on my hand. You can see them better. You got 10 millimeter, 8 millimeter, 6 millimeter, and you can use 4 millimeter beads too. But size 6 seed beads or E beads would work too. Alright, and then you have the icicle beads. I don't know what else to call them. They're partial cones, whatever you want to call them. And you're going to need chain nose pliers, wire cutters, and also needle nose pliers. Now I have two different types of ends. Since there aren't any head pins that are long enough for this, I use 8 inches of the 20 gauge wire, and I have this type of tip that I used for most of them, and then I had a knotted head that I just figured out how to do today. I actually watched a YouTube video on how to do this, and they use 24 gauge wire for it, but it can be done with 20 gauge, and that ends up being a knotted head pin, and I'm going to show you how to do that. And so let's see, let's get the wire first. In fact, 6 of them, the ones that I cut and I'm rolling today, the snowflakes, are going to have this head. But I still need to make 3 more of these, and so I'm going to make sure that they match. And I've already got 3 of these made, and they have this tip on them, which is what I call a wrapped tip. It's kind of like a wrapped loop, but you squeeze the tip. And I'm going to show you how to do that in just a moment. Okay, so you're going to pull out 8 inches, and that looks to be about the right length. I didn't bring my ruler over here. Actually, that's longer than 8 inches. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut that. And right now I'm demonstrating how I do this tip. And the way I do that is I grab a hold of the end of the wire at the widest end up here, and I wrap it all the way around. Actually, start that over. Okay, so I have my 8-inch piece of wire, and what I'm going to do is show you how I achieved this. And basically what you do is you take your needle nose pliers at the very, very end, about 1.25 inches to 1.5 inches down from the end, and fold it. And so you have this little hairpin type of thing. And what you're going to do is you're going to take your chain nose pliers and you're going to squeeze it closed. Alright, so that way it's closed like this tip is right here. Okay, and then what you're going to do is you're going to grab a hold of that about 3/16 of an inch away from the very end of your tip around here. You could mark your pliers if you want to, so that way you're always at the same place, but it's about 1/2 inch or so from the tip. Then you're going to fold this up and wrap this around once. And if you need to, grab a hold of your needle nose pliers just to hold on to it. If you have flat nose pliers, you can use those too. And what you want to do is you want to make sure that you go over the fold that's there, because you're going to cover that up. Alright, and then you're going to pull your flat nose pliers away from the wrapped section so that you have some room to work with. And you're going to wrap this end around the fold, covering up as much of the fold as you can. Alright, so one more step. I'm going to go get my flat nose pliers. Okay, so with your flat nose pliers, you can actually go ahead and grab the end of that to hang on to it a little bit better, and use your chain nose pliers to grab a hold of that wire and wrap it around again. And pull away a little bit more. because you're basically trying to cover up as much of that fold as you can. It can be a little exposed, but the idea is to cover it up. All right, and so since we have it a little bit messy and the coils are a little bit spaced far apart, this is where the flat nose pliers really comes in handy. You can actually squeeze them together to make it look a little bit more neat. And you can also make sure you trim the excess, which is what I'm just about to do. You take your pliers and you trim that excess. There. Okay, so that one's actually ready for the beads. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and take the beads off of my fishing line here. And this is 50-pound fishing line, in case you were wondering. All right, so we've got the big one, medium size one, and small one. Okay, so we're going to get started with the size 6 seed bead. That goes on first. And then the cone. Make sure the cone points toward the little tiny bead at the bottom. Then you're going to put on your 6mm bead, and you're going to put the medium-sized icicle bead on. And then you're going to put the 8mm on. And then you're going to put the large icicle bead on. And one more bead, the 10mm, is last. And put that on there. Okay, and then what I like to do is I like to do a wrapped loop. So that way it won't come undone. It's great for the ornament hanger. So what I do to do that is I take my needle nose pliers and figure out how big you want your hole to be for hanging the ornament hanger. It doesn't have to be that big. And so I'm going to put it about halfway. And you're going to wrap this tail end around and bring it under. And then you're going to wrap this end around the bottom of your wire. And it would be handy to have either your chain nose or your flat nose pliers nearby to make this tighter. Alright, so I'm going to turn this to make it a little easier for me to do my wrapped loop. Some people don't actually use their pliers, but I do, because it's really hard for me to grab a hold of it. And you don't, 3 or 4 times is enough. You don't actually need to make sure you have the whole thing on there. Just as long as you've got your loop and it's secure. To me, this is the hardest part of making a wrapped loop, but I feel that the wrapped loop for this application is important. Alright, so I'm going to cut off the excess. And I am going to squeeze the actual excess into the wrapped loop. And if you have the room, you can probably squeeze those together. No, that doesn't work as well. But anyway, you have your wrapped loop at the top. If you want to, you can always add a ribbon or a bow to the top to dress it up and to hide that if you wanted to. But with me, I'm just going to go ahead and put on one of my ornament hangers that I made with a paper clip. And just put that on there on the top. And the way you do that actually is you slide it in actually from the top down. And then I squeeze these together with my needle nose pliers to close it. So that way it won't come off no matter what. And that is that for the icicles. Oh, that's right. I'm going to demonstrate how to make the knot at the very end, and it is actually a knot. So let's do that next. So I'm going to grab 8 inches of the 20 gauge wire. I do want it to be long enough. That's about right. Okay, believe it or not, this is definitely different. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to put your wire between your needle nose pliers at the smallest area at the top. And you're going to wrap this around. And you're going to keep on going around in a loop. About 2 or 3 times. Keeping it small. And if you want to, you can use your flat nose pliers to squeeze that a little bit. Okay, then the next step, put your needle nose pliers back in and bend your wire up. So that way you have your coils at the bottom of your wire here, facing up. And if you have one of those nylon straighteners, you can always straighten it out like that with that. I haven't actually used it for that, but I do have a pair, but I don't use them. Okay, so, and then what you're going to do is you're going to take this end of the wire and put it through your knot. And again, chain nose pliers or flat nose pliers, doesn't matter. Pull on it and pull, pull, pull for all you're worth. And that's it. You've got a knot at the end of your wire. And that'll work just fine for these icicles. In fact, let's see what it actually looks like when you put one of the tiny size 6 seed beads on top of that. Yeah, I think that almost looks better than the folded one with the wrapped folded tip. But either one works. So you choose which one you want to use, which one you want to do, and there you go. That's it for the icicles. And I hope you like this project. Sorry for me stumbling with my words at the very beginning, but I don't do bloopers. I just roll with the punches and let it happen. So if you like this video and you want to see more and be notified of when I add new videos, go ahead and hit the subscribe button and hit like, hit share this video with everybody that you know that likes paper bead making anyway. And if you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comments below. And I will provide the link to this project and free pattern sheet that is on my website at paperbeadcrafts.com. That'll be in the description. And that's it for today. Thank you and have a great day. Goodbye.